Welcome to The Common Bridge, where policy and current events are discussed in a fiercely nonpartisan manner. The host, Richard Helppie, is a philanthropist, entrepreneur, and columnist who has over 1 million listeners around the world. His podcast and YouTube shows draws guests and audiences across the political spectrum.
Where it kind of the very touchy and very delicate issue of trans activism, and where the electorate is dividing around this. And let me just stipulate that there are people every day that are born with indeterminate genitalia or have both male and female characteristics and such. And as they develop, their secondary sex characteristics may develop as something other than that assigned at birth. Okay, and I think no one has an issue with those folks of being treated well and so forth. But it seems to be something different happening. Dare we dive into that, or do we maybe ask Brian just to edit this whole part out?
Brian, you can edit this later. I will definitely dive into it. I just answered a question today on the NEA and their birthing parent. You know this one, right?
Right.
And I feel that what we clearly have is a bridge too far on the left of when you're trying to pander or to accommodate every splinter group, what happens is that we lose sight of our true mission, such as in education. To me, in the United States, because through my wife and other associations, I've done a lot of international education in so many different countries. This country is actually less focused on education in the educational sphere than almost any country that I know.
Amen.
It has so many other agendas. And that is a perfect example to me when you start talking about, you can't say the word mother, it's a birthing parent, right? So who are we talking about? The few transgender men who still have some physical capability on a female side in order to get pregnant, and non-binary. And non-binary is nothing more than a personal choice. That you're not even saying you're not male, you're not female, you just don't want to say. So we're going to change the entire system so we can't say that there are mothers anymore and now they are birthing parents. What happens to somebody that has adopting a kid? You're no longer the mother, you're what, the adoptive parent? Well, this kind of focus on this type of thing means that we're not focusing on our central mission for our kids, which is broad-based education that they are learning. And then as they get older, they can specialize, whether it's a trade, whether it's like in your situation, or Brian's situation, medicine for his son, so on and so forth. You can specialize. But I believe, honestly, what we're doing is we're moving away from what keeps the United States on top. We cannot win at anything if we're sitting there and arguing constantly about the transgender rights of a few athletes, which, by the way, now several organizations have come out and say they have a disproportionate advantage, so they can't be in the Olympics. Well, you think the Olympics, of course, they want to be inclusive, so they're saying, well, men who are now women, they have too much testosterone, so we're not going to allow them to compete in certain areas. What does that say to you? It seems to me that the whole transgender rights issue has been blown out of proportion. And as you said really well, yes, of course, we want to have that kind of support. But hormone therapy at 12, I'm on the left side of the spectrum, and I don't agree with that.
Well, I mean, and this is one of the things that we're dealing with here is that, this is obviously very touchy and very personal, and I've actually known people who, were born male, but as they entered puberty, began to develop breasts and things, and a young woman I knew said she had to leave school because the boys were becoming attractive to her. Okay, although she was, assigned or she was, male from birth. So that does happen, and we do need to have compassion there. But when I listen to here's the argument as the way I understand it. A trans activist person will say, well, the body and the mind don't agree. All right. So we're not going to change the mind, we're going to change the body. And so we're going to administer drugs to stop the body from doing what it would naturally do. Somehow that's finding your real self by first stopping what your body wants to do. Okay. And then we're going to administer more drugs to make your body do something it naturally wouldn't do. And then the things that we can't overcome with pharmaceuticals, now we're going to use surgery. And by the way, if you raise the question and say that's a problem, now you're a bigot. And, I watch kids, very dear to me, go through phases, all right, of what clothes they want to wear and who they think they are. And the best line I heard, someone said, yeah, when I was 8, I wanted to be a dinosaur, right? But nobody was fitting me with scales and a tail. So I think we need to be smart about this, and we need to be compassionate. But the place for kindergartners to learn is not about various genders and identities and genitalia. They should be learning the building blocks of mathematics. They should be learning how to speak, in this country, Spanish, and they should be learning how to speak a little bit of Mandarin too, so that we can join the rest of the world and join this hemisphere. And of course, the grounding in the English language and a full history and so forth. And if you've probably seen the news reports that a woman that still had her male genitalia was put in a woman's prison in New Jersey and impregnated 2 other inmates. Okay, and nobody can look at that and say that's a problem. And if the line doesn't get drawn someplace, when your daughter goes to college and is assigned a roommate, and the roommate says, well, I identify as a female, but is still very much physically a male, then what? Okay, so we've got to think this through. There's always something that comes out, and I got a lot of vitriol and I don't want to call it hate mail, but people that weren't happy about suggesting that we can maybe get to energy sources that aren't going to put CO2 into the air. So if we keep this part in, I'm sure to get a bunch.
I just want to make the last comment on here. My line is drawn on up till the age of consent. I don't think that we should be paying for transgender therapies or things like that. My problem is I don't want. I'm like you. For a certain age, I don't think kids can make an informed choice until they are a bit older. Okay.
Yeah, and we should be kind to everybody.
And if they want to make that choice once they become an adult, God bless them. Okay, that's up to them. But there's a lot of fluidity when we were teenagers. There was people trying different. Some people were bisexual for a while. Then they're hetero, so on and so forth. But there's a very different thing than taking drugs, as you noted, to start changing your body, which in most cases is permanent. And I'm not so sure a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old is ready to make that life choice. That choice can be made later on. Anyway, that's my feeling about it. I also feel that it takes us away from, as you've said, kind of like what is our purpose in the schools. In particular, I don't like the schools having to be the battleground for all of these issues, when really I think it depends basically on how do you look at schools. I don't look at schools as being the place that we dump all of our problems, then try to solve our problems in the school. I don't think that's the right approach. I think the right approach is that we need to focus on learning, inclusivity, all the things that you say, but not trying to make it into the culture and social wars.
Indeed, and we need to equip young people to become productive adults. And I never knew anything about the personal life of my teachers, right? Because I just didn't care. They were there to teach me to read and to behave myself, and they were successful in half of that. So I was grateful for that. Just kind of another cultural issue. We had a great guest on recently, Adam Coleman, who's written and spoken a lot about fatherlessness and the correlation between young people getting offline.
I saw that. It was an excellent episode.
Yeah, he really articulate and bluntness. And, I will just say I have a personal issue with men that don't raise their children. Okay, it's one of my brother-in-law had a saying in his hallway that I always liked. It said the best thing a man can do for his children is to love their mother, and try to raise your kids and get them launched. I've seen strong women come from great relationships with their fathers. Okay, they've got a man in their life. They've got somebody that can speak to them, that can be there for them. And same way with young men. I know that knowing I'd have to answer to my father was a great deterrent. Okay, so how do we get to? Can we make the idea of having a mother and father popular again? Or is it really popular, but we're just, again, being misled by media and politics?
My personal feeling is that for the majority of the United Americans or anywhere else in the world, being a mother and father is very popular, right? I think it's really good. I think that there has been a number of social and legal policies where fathers have been separated from their children. And I don't think that we have done a very good job at repairing that. We have done some. Less incarceration. That's a huge part. There's also a whole series of regulatory things of if the father is present, then people lose certain benefits.
That's craziness,
on and on and on. So I think that to answer your question, I think that we need to, if the Republicans are very serious about being pro-life, they need to also be pro-fatherhood. They need to be pro-family. These kinds of things, and they need to put measures behind that to, if they're going to have babies, it's not just, well, you got to take care of them. No, there's got to be a complete change in attitude from a societal attitude to more to what you're talking about. Yeah, I'm the same way, no different than you. Like my father, you don't talk back to your mom. You don't do this, you don't do that. There was a lot of don'ts, but on the other hand, I taught that to my son, right? You don't disrespect your sister, definitely not your mom. These kinds of things. Now, if you do that intergenerationally, you get kids that are much more refined, inclusive. They're much more successful because they accept women more into their, into the workplace, their lives as executives. They don't just say, oh, it's got to be a man, otherwise I don't respect. There's a lot of really fantastic things that come from that. And there are tens of millions, 100 million people in this country that believe in that. But we don't actually talk about that as a society. So, and I'm sorry to say, I don't think the Democrats are going to do this.
Well, we've had two things that we could do that we're not doing. First of all, child tax credit. All right, that's widely popular. Use the tax system to say, look, if you're raising a child, we know you need extra resources. Great, I'm all for that. Also, maybe that time we're spending teaching various, fringe theories, we maybe spend time teaching someone how to be a good parent, okay, how to be a good mother and father. So use the tax system, use the education system. But that's all going to come down to elections and the media. And so we've got the midterms coming up. In fact, the primaries for Michigan are tomorrow. We're recording this on August 1st. Really interesting. Any take on the primaries or the midterm? And again, I granted that you're coming from Australia by Singapore, by Budapest, by Toronto, by Detroit.
I think that the history is a good lesson here. Definitely the Democrats have a major problem. They'd have a major problem even if they had a wildly popular president. Obama was popular, and he had the worst midterm results in, 50 years, right? Yeah. Partly the Democrats are not very good at touting their own horn when they do something right. They are continuing always, let's go farther. They don't know when to stop, right, kind of thing. So I think the Democrats have a PR image problem on top of the fact that the party in power always has a problem. That's one thing. I think on the right-hand side, There has been some movements, such as the end of Roe v. Wade, that give the Democrats some hope, okay, kind of thing. I'm happy to see we're less culture wars right now. I'm hoping that I think the Democrats are making a massive mistake to back any kind of Trumpian candidates in order to get their guy in, because the Trump guys are too extreme. So therefore, they will get elected even if they're not that strong. I think that this is a really bad idea. I honestly believe right now that the politics in the United States are not toxic; they're more silly, right?
Yeah.
When you have Trump trying to figure out which one of 9 candidates in Michigan he's going to back, and one day it's this guy and that guy I think is really nice, kind of thing.
Well, here's Trump's thing. Okay, again, it's all about Trump and Trump's brand. What he's been doing in congressional races, Senate races, and governor races, and here in the state of Michigan with the Michigan primary, he looks and he sees who the likely winner is going to be, and then he says, "I'm really looking at them hard," and he offers his endorsement, and then within minutes, there's ads up with the candidate and Trump's actually bigger more in the foreground, and I'm like, wait a minute, how did they produce that ad that fast? How come Trump's so prominent? How come it's on all these channels? Now, I don't know this as a fact, but I'm kind of connecting the dots, and I can see, oh, all right, I'm going to offer you my endorsement, but here's what you're going to do. You're going to go up on TV with this, and I'm going to be prominent here and whatever, and it's all back down to it's Trump. Then Trump's
fundraising.
Yeah, and it's going to be, and Trump's going to be able to say, look at all these candidates I endorsed that won. I'm still a big player. And what I've advised the Republicans to do, dump Trump, okay? Just have a little backbone and say, you know what? You're a losing candidate, go away, and we're going to go on about our business here.
I'm going to ask you a question about that in just a second.
Okay, please ask it first.
But first, I want to answer your other question. I think that the Democrats are going to lose the House. I don't think it's going to be a landslide. I think it'll be about a 25 seat majority by the Republicans, which is about a 30 to 40 swing, kind of thing. So I think that will be the case. But I do think that the Democrats have enough decent candidates that they're going to get a 51-49 in the Senate. That's my view.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a couple candidates. Tim Ryan's running better. Again, he runs in the middle, better than anybody expected. Trump, J.D. Vance, that's not necessarily a good thing. Of course, the core guys love him, but the other people are like, the guy's a little bit too extreme in certain ways. So I think the what's going to happen here is if the Democrats run to the middle, I think that they can possibly hold the Senate. I'm predicting 51-49. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I think a 25 to 30 majority for the Republicans and the congressional side. What do you think?
Well, I look at what I think is very simple. We should all be happy that the government is balanced that way and that they would maybe be working for us. But I think some of the vote's going to come down to, hey, you're a reasonable Democrat, but you're going to do what Nancy Pelosi tells you to, or you're not going to get campaign cash and you're not going to get on the good committees. And similarly, Kevin McCarthy on the Republican side. So if we were not in this really pre-Civil War partisan battle, great, 51-49, either way, 20 seats here, 20 seats there, either way. My district got redistricted. And so I was aligned with the geography to my west, where it was a very conservative Republican, basically what they call so-called safe seat. Now it's more realigned to the east, and it's got a middle-of-the-road Democrat, okay? And I think Debbie Dingell seems like a reasonable person, absent the fact that we're in this partisan war, all right? She'd be a great person to be an independent.
She needs to retire.
Well, no, she's not that old. I don't think, and actually the Republican candidate is quite good too. So we'll see what happens.
I think though that gives to when there's been non-gerrymandered type of approach, like Michigan. I thought that was a really good approach, right? When you have extreme gerrymandering, that of course changes things significantly. This is not the place to talk about it, but I just think the results are the results, and I think that is going to be the case. Now I want to ask you the big question, all right? Will the Republican Party dump Trump? Will that be gradual? Will that be just a groundswell of a DeSantis, who is the clear front runner right now? Or what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I don't know if they will, because the Republicans' ability to self-destruct is legendary. Okay, they need to, and it seems like they're trying to. They want Trump to go away, but they don't want to have to actually do anything about it. And look, Ron DeSantis has proven to be a great governor in Florida. Everything they throw at him, every smear that they do, he just beats it back like, well, here's what the data says. DeSantis is a candidate, all right? Mike Pence, all right, who is a quiet guy. I've had a chance to meet him a couple times. He's got experience as a governor. He's got experience in the House. I think you're going to find at the end of the day, Mike Pence was the adult in the room, okay? And when Trump was careening and bouncing off walls and ordering Diet Cokes, it was Mike Pence that was calming things down. They've been talking about Mitt Romney again, all right? And of course, Romney is hated by the extreme end of the Republican Party. Mitt Romney was a capable governor. He was a good businessman. He did a great job with the Olympics. He could actually manage things. Nikki Haley, great governor in South Carolina, got her international credentials burnished as ambassador to the United Nations. And at one time, she was crossways with Trump, and Trump said, well, she's confused. Nikki Haley was out that afternoon saying, no, I'm not confused. I know what my job is and what my role is. So I think, there's another great candidate there. So I think that the Republicans are not necessarily a Ron DeSantis party. I think they've got people there. And I also often ponder, okay, what will the Democrats do? And, Joe Manchin is a centrist Democrat, and he speaks very articulately, and he'd probably be a very strong candidate. Now, here's the question to both parties. Will the primary system allow us to get good candidates? Because the primary system for both parties is hideous. At least the Democrats are smart enough to tell everybody, go away, here's who we're going to pick, okay? And everybody, Buttigieg, you're going to get to be transportation secretary, right? Now leave, all right? The Republicans self-destructed and allowed Donald Trump to get an early toehold with, 22% of the vote. But the last thing I want to say is this. For both the Democrats and the Republicans, there's this populist urge that says our government isn't doing what we need it to do. It doesn't feel like our government. It feels like the government of power mongers and lobbyists. And it's being aided and abetted by a media system that keeps stoking that. And my proof point is this. If that populist urge could bring someone as unqualified as Donald Trump to the Oval Office, couldn't some reasonable person or party tap into that and actually start getting some change?
Well, my answer to that is, I don't know if you know it, but there's a new party called the Forward Party.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Which, let's not
Andrew
talk about
Yang,
that.
yeah.
That'll last about 10 minutes, But on the Democratic side, Democratic Party side, they do not have the lineup that the Republicans do.
Mm-hmm.
If you really winnow it through pretty fast in terms of people who are actually successful, it comes down to people like Gavin Newsom. Hated by a lot of people, most populous state, but if you want to also on the flip side, say on the other end, I don't believe that Kamala Harris is electable. Okay, she didn't make it even to the first round last time. So the Democrats have not really got a centrist a lot of centrist candidates that would be broadly appealing. You mentioned about Biden being in his basement. Biden was not elected because he was Biden. He was like the safe choice that everybody said, we kind of know this guy and we don't want Trump, right?
I agree.
And so when the Democrats come up with a candidate, they're going to have way better than that next time. My personal prediction is, and I've heard some great combinations because on my thing, I think DeSantis has the inside track. He's also, he looks kind of like, you know, a regular guy. He's got a little bit of ruddy complexion, you know, and he, as you say, he stands up and he takes the blows and he pushes right back, you know, kind of thing. And he's always surrounds himself with a coterie of people so that he's got kind of like some experts around him. That's an impressive approach. I think some of the other candidates that you're talking about, I understand Mike Pence. My sister lives in Indiana. There are people who feel in Indiana that he was too extreme on the right side.
Sure.
But now that Supreme Court is already over there, that, you know, Mike Pence is not that far to the right, okay? And he was an adult in the room. It would be interesting to see Mike Pence as a candidate. I think that DeSantis would be more successful as a candidate, primarily because it's another generation. He's also a veteran that was successful in the military. Again, he's a strong guy. He kind of is like Adam Kinzinger, but a little bit more, you know, gravitas.
Yeah, right. He's got that. So top two. So if DeSantis at the top of the ticket.
Yeah.
Top two candidates for vice president.
Well, if you threw in there Nikki Haley, then you're going to win, because then you've got yourself a woman of color. You've got DeSantis, who protects the Christian part of this, because Nikki Haley is a Sikh after all, right? I don't think Nikki Haley can win because ultimately the evangelical, they cannot support a non-Christian at the top. Enough of them would not be there. But as a number two, and DeSantis is young, you know, the chances of him having a problem with his health and office are minimal, you know, unless somebody took him out or something like that. And I think Nikki Haley is a great number two. Kristi Noem, absolutely not. Nobody gets elected from South Dakota, you know. And I think that the other thing with, as you said, she's burnished her credentials, Nikki Haley along the way. So I think that is a clear winning combination.
Yeah, Tim Scott, maybe. All right, as we're nearing the end of our time, Robert, real quick on the Democrat ticket for 2024, if you have a view, and then anything that we didn't cover today that you'd like to make sure we talk about.
My personal feeling is that the Democrats need a white male at the top in order to keep the large part of the vote. I'm not being racial about it. Joe Biden got 61% of the white vote, okay? And that those people vote. So I think a Gavin Newsom, who is photogenic, or if you could find somebody else. I like Joe Manchin, but I think the progressives would just vilify him, and they would walk out on him. They won't walk out on Gavin Newsom. So I think Gavin Newsom at the top. I think a woman, a white woman, as a number two. Could be a Gretchen. I don't think Gretchen has got
God forbid.
Well, I'm just throwing her name out there. It needs to be, I think, a governor. There's not that many.
You don't have Cuomo's not in the mix here anyplace.
I don't think Cuomo can be in the mix. And the reason why, not because he's not smart enough, is just that he has pissed off too many people.
Yeah. Yeah, I may write there's one race that I may be vocal about on and one race that I feel strongly about. It's Michigan governor. And I just want to put it like this. I think that the current governor we've got has to go. And it's about ethics and leadership. Is when you're giving 10 million people directives and you ignore them yourself. I know people who had elderly relatives die in nursing homes that couldn't visit them, died without a hug the last 8 months of their life. And we were told not to go to Florida because everyone down there's dying. It was a lie, but we were told that by our governor. And we were told, don't visit our elderly, don't travel. And this governor travels to Florida to visit her elderly father. When the only answer was, I'm sorry, Dad, I've just told 10 million people they can't do this. And then it goes on and on where you couldn't buy tomato seeds and so forth. But this governor needs to go. She can't run on her track record, and the ethics have been horrible. Again, that's.
I think she's an intellectual lightweight also, personally. I really do. I think she has a great background, her family's great background, but she's not at that level. But anyway, and I understand what you're saying. And since I don't live here in that type of, Boris Johnson was kicked out as, prime minister in England for this kind of thing.
For bad hair, though, right?
Terrible hair. But just about any subject that we have not covered, this is my chance to be able to say to everyone in the United States and beyond, actually, I think we are stabilized, even though people feel that we are not. I think that Biden has been a stabilizing force with NATO, with various cooperation around the world. Biden is clearly a transitory, transitional president. I don't want him to run again. I think that it's easy to pick on anybody, whether we picked on Trump walking up the stairs and couldn't hold the glass, or Biden, whatever thing he's doing. The fact is, these guys are in their 70s. Biden's about to be 80. That can't happen in the future. The flip side is, and we didn't talk about economics, but I don't think the U.S. economy is in bad shape at all, okay? They did pump too much money in. It did cause inflation. Fed realizes that. I think they're dialing it back, the three quarters. I think that we are definitely okay. If you look around the world, there's no economy that is more dynamic than the U.S. economy. Every single person I know outside the United States, other than the Chinese, by the way, they all say, never count the U.S. out. The U.S. has got the best tools, and we have the global reserve currency. Indeed. Bitcoin is not going to blow us away, okay? So I think that my statement to everybody here is that things are not that bad at all. I think that I would love to see a moderate movement away from what some of the left is doing, which is way too much money throwing into the economy. It was a bad idea. I think we should be more issue focused, which has actually happened, whether it was infrastructure or chips or even a Family Leave Act or something like that. I think we do better than the cornucopia of X trillion dollars. So my takeaway message is thank you very much for inviting me. I think it's important for me to say to everybody, Richard Helppie and his offsider here, videographer Brian Kruger, do a service to this country, and they constantly bring on terrific guests, which is a little bit to the right for me, but that's okay. And we remain friends, and I want to thank you for inviting me.
Great. Thank you, Robert. So we've been on the Common Bridge today with one of our favorite guests, Robert Greenfield, who's traveled literally halfway around the world to be on the Common Bridge. The Common Bridge, of course, is at Substack.com, where you will find our columns, you'll find video, you'll find podcast access, our magazine, and more. So please join us there. Go to Substack.com, put The Common Bridge in your search engine. For those of you that like to listen, we are on every podcast outlet. Of course, the transcripts of the podcasts are available at Substack.com. Be a paid subscriber or a free subscriber, YouTube TV, and, of course, at Mission Control Radio on your Radio Garden app. And with our guest, Robert Greenfield, this is Rich Helppie, signing off on the Common Bridge.
Thanks for joining us on the Common Bridge. Please subscribe to the Common Bridge on Substack.com, where you can find more interviews, columns, podcasts, video, and other nonpartisan discussions to the problems of today. On Substack, you can access the full archive and bonus columns, podcasts, and interviews for only $5 a month. Please go to Substack.com and search for the Common Bridge and subscribe.